We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Great to have you all with me. If you're watching live, either on YouTube, Twitter, or Rumble, or if you are listening on your little listening device in your pocket, also known as a cell phone. Great to have you here. Be sure to subscribe wherever you are consuming this content. We got a fun show today. Introduce my guest in a moment here. We're going to be taking a trip back to 1999 to talk about the culture and all things having to do with that interesting time in life, and one of my favorite times when I look back on my life, on my own life. So before I introduce my guest, I do want to talk about some coffee that I love, made by my friend Steve Fox over at Fox and Sons Coffee. It's my favorite coffee. It's all we have in our house. My favorite type of Steve's. I'm a bold coffee guy. I love his Den Blend Dark Roast. But I've tried others. He has everything you could think of at light roasts, mixes, blends, and espressos as well. So check him out at FoxN, the letter N, sons.com. And you can get 15% off an order of $40 or more by using promo code John at checkout. All righty, let's bring in my guest for today. And my guest is Ross Bennies. And Ross is a journalist. He's a market research analyst and an author. He's written a few books. We talked about his last book, I believe it was the last book, last time he was on, called Rural Rebellion, How Nebraska Became a Republican Stronghold. His new book could not be any more different than that previous book. And it's pretty cool, though. It's called 1999, The Year Culture Conquered America and Kickstarted Our Bizarre Times. Ross, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Great to have you back, man. And so I talked about there in the intro how different these last two books you've written are. Just start off with, talk about that. How did this idea come about? Where did it come from for you?
And all my books have kind of been different. Before I wrote the Nebraska book, I wrote a sex research book. So it's kind of been all over the board. But, this book's certainly a lot more fun than Rural Rebellion, the one that I was on the show a few years ago discussing. Instead of interviewing state senators and spending all my time on government websites, I'm out here watching documentaries about the insane clown posse and old Jerry Springer clips. So the research is way more fun. And just the way it came about is just noticing all these little crazy things over the last few years that will remind me of the trashy entertainment I loved during the 90s. So if you see people threatening to have fist fights during a congressional hearing, that to me is like Jerry Springer in the Capitol building, and everything that's gone on with some of these crypto schemes where there's been mania and all of a sudden the market implodes and people are wondering what the hell happened. That reminded me a lot of Beanie Babies, and pro wrestling's kind of all over the place, especially when Hulk Hogan won a lawsuit by claiming that there's a difference between him and his character on what he said during a live TV show, a live radio interview with Howard Stern. He said, what I said applied to Hulk Hogan, not to Terry Bollea. So, and I think we're just seeing these little facets of 90s trashy television bleed into the contemporary culture. And enough of those things happened that I decided to write a book about it.
Yeah. And so the 90s, I remember the 90s well. I was born in 1983, so I think I'm a little bit older.
Not too much older, though.
But 1999, I remember that time well. And I didn't get to read your whole book, but reading, some of those segments, in the one segment talking about the Jerry Springer, Too Hot for TV, that DVD. I like reading that. Like that was my exact same experience. Like, one of your friends gets a copy of it, and then you're watching it. You have 10 buddies over, and it's like just really, and like you said, it wasn't that crazy.
No,
But
it
there were just
wasn't.
a couple of things that were a little outlandish, but yeah, most of it wasn't anything different that was on the regular show. But they had that marketing gimmick. But anyway, let's hone in here.
I'm fascinated that that's a cultural experience that goes well beyond my hometown of young dudes having a friend getting the Jerry Springer Too Hot for TV and everyone coming over and watching it. It's fascinating to me.
It is fascinating. But so 1999, that year, why do you think that's a year that was really pinnacle? I mean, of course, it was the year, the last year of the previous century, kind of a turning point. But why 1999?
Yeah, and you to be fair, you could write a similar book about like 96 or 02, but I think 99, everything was just a little nuttier. You have like the end of millennium and Y2K stuff happening, so a lot of entertainers are out there doing stunts or their own specials that are pretty trashy. Like MTV had this bunker project where they put a bunch of people in and they like had cameras. You could watch them all the time and see if doomsday would really happen. There's just kind of that sense of zaniness that made the pop culture a little more retrograde. But the year 2000 was also the first year in the census that you reached the threshold of half of Americans having a computer in their household. So I think a lot of this stuff took off because the internet was starting to emerge, and fan communities and fan forums and new ways of disseminating media, like Napster debuted in 1999, helped a lot of this stuff flourish in a way that would have been more difficult with more like gatekeepers that like media didn't disseminate as easily before 99 as it did afterwards.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a turning point. And, I talk about it a lot with my friends who were around the same age, like, really my micro generation kind of spans both into, Gen X and millennial. There's people born like 1984, 85, maybe back to, 1978, 79, where you kind of grew up in the time before the internet, before Napster, but before this change, and we have those memories, but also all of that stuff changed while we were very impressionable and still young, and going through high school and things like that. So it kind of like a really unique experience, I think, from that perspective. But when you look back on 1999, on this time period, I know you've talked about it, enjoying, watching these things and kind of looking back on it. But I mean, what do you think about that era was particularly like really important in facilitating change?
Well, I would say media deregulation. So that kind of occurs alongside the technological adoption. But in the mid to early 90s, you had a lot of rules get eliminated that determine like who could own what. So just to give you an example, like the Telecommunications Act of 1996, once that's passed, telecoms can become cable companies can become phone carriers, and so on. A few years before that, you had rules being eliminated over broadcast networks being able to produce their own programming and sell it and syndicate it in other markets. So as those ownership restrictions got reduced, media conglomerates got bigger. They went through more mergers, and they produced hits as cheaply as they could. There's always been a desire to get a cheap hit, but that desire became more intensified during the 90s following these deregulations, and that contributed to the boom in talk shows, and then eventually reality TV. Like a lot of the stuff, infomercials, even like a lot of the stuff that's considered trashy is made cheaply, but it has an audience and people still love it. I mean, I love this stuff, so I'm not denigrating it at all. but I don't think you would have had the popularity of like reality and talk shows without those deregulations, because you would have been stuck with the old way of producing and syndicating content, which wasn't quite as favorable to those types of programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was really a change that came about, really started then, and to change how we consume content, right? Like you talked
Yeah.
about Napster. Back then, of course, you had a phone modem, at least
Yeah.
when you first started out, and you got on to AOL or whatever, and then try to download some music on your parents' computer, and it would a little bar would pop up and say this will be done in 5 hours
Oh yeah,
downloading.
you have to go like watch a movie or go ride your bike around and come back and hope someone didn't need to use the phone.
Exactly. Yeah. But then at least that was the start. Like that was the start. Like I want this song, just this song. I'm going to go out and get it. It's not like I go buy a whole CD, a whole album or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of the birthright of like starting to like curate our own media, right?
Well, for sure, and it's not just Napster and like the pirate sites that follow Napster when it's shut down. 99 also saw the birth of TiVo, of Netflix. Now, Netflix wasn't a streaming service at the time, but it was really easy to curate it was getting easier to curate your own media selection. Like with TiVo, the you don't have to watch live now. Like you can time shift stuff. Like you can build your own library of shows that you're interested in without having to sit in front of your couch. That's a huge change in how media is consumed. And all these things are happening together at the same time in a kind of rudimentary way looking back now, but at the time was like exhilarating and innovative.
So let me ask you this, because culture has changed a lot since 1999, right? So if there was one part of that culture that you'd want to bring back, what would it be?
Oh man, that's a good question. Well, a lot of it is coming back. I was gonna say I'd bring back like baggy pants, because like I always felt they were more comfortable than like super skin tight pants. And I actually I wore such baggy clothes when I was an intern at Esquire that they gave me a makeover. Like I was so unfashionable. I wasn't wearing Jinkos, but like, I was not wearing what like metrosexual men wore in 2014.
Yeah.
And so I'd say I'd like that to make a comeback, but kind of already is. So I think the difficult part about that question is like thinking about what I'd like to come back that hasn't already. Maybe those snap bracelets, those are kind of fun.
Those are back, actually.
Oh, those are back. Well, there you go. See, everything I'll bring up like is probably back, and I may not even be aware of it.
Yeah, my daughter got one at a birthday party. I'm like, I remember these. Well,
okay.
I guess somebody found one and thought, oh, start producing these again and selling them.
Brilliant. Yeah, they're fun.
What about like, because you talk about in the book, move like the that being the time of like some of the greatest movies being made, some of the best comedies. Yep. Aside from that, you had Fight Club that came out. Do you think there's been really a major shift from then, late 90s until today in like the quality of movies?
Oh, definitely. Because the 90s, you had more independent cinema, and the theaters were still like the bulk of cinema revenue. So, now with streaming, and I love the access of streaming, but it doesn't produce quite the same incentives. You're not going to get like a comedy with $50 million budget that's like made to be a good comedy and goes to theaters and does well. Like that's just going to be a straight to streaming movie most of the time, or it's going to go to theaters and probably flop and have a small budget. So now it's like big blockbusters exclusively almost to power the cinema business. And it's, familiar intellectual property that we're just going to milk until it dies. I mean, there were some sequels in the 90s, but like those great movies you're mentioning in 99, if you looked at the share of box office movies in 1999 that were sequels or prequels or reboots, I bet you it's like a third of what it will be in like 2024. So a lot of that has evaporated. And you could blame Netflix, I guess, but the conditions just aren't the same as they used to be. I think there's still a lot of creative people in Hollywood to make great stuff, but a lot of it gets channeled to original series instead. I think TV is better now than it was in '99, like high quality TV.
Yeah, I mean, part of what drives that is just people are watching, I would think, a lot more TV today than they were in 1999. Maybe.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And if you're already watching at home, like there's not a big difference between watching a TV show or a movie, like for the streaming service or the entertainment company. In fact, a TV show is probably better because they could get you to sit down for 10 hours over the course of a month. As a movie, they might only get you for 2.5 hours one time. So they get more engagement. They can serve you more ads. Most of these streaming services are ad supported now. So a lot of the incentive has changed around it, but these things kind of occurred in tandem. 99, I feel like you had the trashiest stuff, like Jerry Springer was more popular than it ever had been. But you mentioned cinema that's probably the best year in cinema history with Fight Club and Matrix and American Pie and all these other great movies. And The Sopranos came out too, and great music too. So it wasn't all trashy.
Yeah. So like some things were kind of got better from there, and some things have gotten worse. One thing that you talk about is, the pornography industry.
Yep.
And how kind of that was kind of, I don't know if this is a word you use, but I'll use it here myself, kind of like a gateway, like 1999's internet was just starting up. And now today, I mean, it's ridiculous with like OnlyFans and the access to it. It's unfortunate, but kids today, I mean, they're finding porn, on their phones when they're in like elementary school. It's kind of insane. And like, you can think back to, when we were kids, I mean, the access to it was like, someone gets their hands on a Playboy magazine, and then, kids are, looking at it in a treehouse or whatever. But now it's like, so accessible on the cell phone.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, gosh, me and my friends would download porn when we were like, I don't know, let's say 12 years old or something. I mean, we'd have to like go do something else and then hope that like it came, like we were saying with the Napster, is even more so because it was a video.
Yeah.
Like maybe we'd watch the like one video a day because like that would take us the whole time. Now to have a phone in your hand, you could just be scrolling. Totally different ball game. But the share of the internet though that like is devoted to porn has declined since then. It's easier to get it for sure because internet speeds are faster. But
is that though? Because like everything else has grown though?
Yeah, because everything else has grown. Like yeah, just think about how big Amazon and I mean, God, there's there's an online service for everything now. And that wasn't quite the case in the 90s. Part of the reason there is an online service to everything is from the entrepreneurship of those porn people taking risks. They were the first ones to do like credit card transactions. They did video browsing and web chatting and cookie tracking, affiliate marketing. They did a lot of stuff that was pretty innovative at the times before other larger, more mainstream companies did. They had the reason to take the risk to privatize their taboo. Like most businesses, they don't want to try to go through the risk of putting a credit card through a transaction online in like 1996. That's like a very unproven thing at the time. So porn contributed to a lot of what we use the internet for. But now, yeah, I don't know. I got kids now. In like 5 to 10 years, it'll probably be a hell of a time trying to like regulate the media they use because like just it's so much more advanced than what I grew up with just 20 years before them.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, my daughter is 9 years old. She doesn't have a cell phone yet, and it's good because like I think it's like throughout the country, there's groups where you can have parents come together at a school, and I think it's like you sign a pledge, like no cell phone. What is it? Up until is it 8th grade? I think. so you get like a large group of parents who are on the same page. Like, we're not gonna do this. So if like she comes home and says like so and so has a cell phone, be like, yeah, but these other 20 kids don't. Like, so it kind of helps if you have a local community of parents all on the same page together or something like that. I mean, I think cell phones are great. There's a lot of power in it, especially today with AI and ChatGPT, where you can type in a couple cues and get a report on something that even just like 5 years ago, you'd have to be a CEO with a team of 1,000 people in order to assemble something like that. So it's crazy. It's crazy powerful, but at the same time, like, learning how to manage it and not let it control you is a skill.
Oh yeah,
really.
it's tough, especially if you have to rely on it for work.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're always working. You're never like this thing's never away from me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I hear you.
Yeah. So when it comes to kind of going off of that, like, a big thing with cell phones today, obviously social media, X, I still call it Twitter most of the time.
Yeah, same here.
But internet trolling, meme culture. Do you see any roots to that in 1999 culture with maybe chat rooms or AOL and Instant Messenger?
That's a good question. I don't see a ton of parallels into that because the early adopters of like those fan sites and stuff, I don't know if they were as trolly as things have become now. Maybe I'm looking through it through rose-colored glasses, because that's one thing that, like, when I would research, it's hard to go back into those forums other than getting a description of them, because like the internet just doesn't archive itself the way music and movies and talk shows and books do.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of get the display of a web page, but like that like a forum from 5 years ago is usually gone. To find something from like 98 that you can actually like go through the comments of still is like rare. So whenever I did come across that, it didn't seem as ominous. However, like the killers in Columbine were on stuff like that, so it clearly existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, like, because like people say, oh, you're making a podcast or you're making YouTube videos. That stuff will be around forever. When you're 60, 70 years old, your kids will be able to watch it. Maybe they won't.
Oh yeah, I doubt they will.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to think about it that way. I hadn't really.
Oh yeah,
really
people say
thought
the
about
internet's
that.
around forever. I mean, gosh, just being in digital media now for 12 years. There's so many websites I've written for that don't exist, or even if they exist, they like change their back end or their CMS in a way that like links are just dead, like old parts of the site are dead, and you have to like go and find the really old link and go to the Internet Archive and hope that it was tracked. And even then, like the images won't load and the comments won't load, so you're getting like kind of a replica of it, but not quite. With YouTube, YouTube's 20 years old right now. It's changed so much in those 20 years. Like what was allowed versus like 20 years ago, you could put porn on YouTube. I mean, you could have nudity. You could violate copyrights. I mean, I could just throw up, Eye of the Tiger on whatever I wanted to for as long as I wanted. No one's going to take it down. I could throw up old movie clips. Now, like it's with the largest advertising company in the world, and Google, they're trying to be really strict on copyrights. So, and then there's like fads of like what's considered hate speech at a certain time, and what may be violating a term at one era and maybe not at another. So those who say like they'll be able to watch your video in like 60 years on YouTube, maybe, but it might get taken down for some violation that doesn't even exist right now.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, we've had our own struggles with YouTube, with this show and having content taken down, and we have like over 6,000 subscribers, but we'll have shows that get only a few hundred views. So it's
and this applies to all of them too. Like
yeah.
the same thing could be said of Apple or any other platform you're on. But the idea that like it's on the internet, it is forever. It's like, well, only if you know where the screenshot or the link is and you save it.
That's
It's
true.
like once you lose that, like maybe not. And,
Yeah.
and video is like the hardest like the video, you got to get that on the like internet archive. Otherwise, like that disappears way faster than text. Once the video is deleted, it's tough.
Yeah, and even with our website, lionsofliberty.com, like we've changed hosting and we changed the layout. And then when we did that, like it broke a bunch of our backlinks. And it's like, are we going to go back and fix all of these? Probably never. Like, you know how much work that would be? Like,
it'd be a ton of work for like a little, like very little traffic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point. So tell me about Beanie Babies. I honestly like this craze missed me. I don't know anything about it.
Oh, bless you.
Tell me why did Beanie Babies why do they demonstrate capitalism?
Well, yeah. So I played on Beanie Babies and Pokemon. To me, Beanie Babies are like the kind of the excesses of capitalism. One of the like, good and bad things of capitalism is it gives you the ability to lose your mind over some like frivolous thing. Like you can go all in on this toy or collectible or passion. And that's what tons of people did in the 90s. Like Beanie Babies, there's little toys sold for like $5 at a small retail store or small pharmacy. There was a belief that they were rare and that there was this group of collectors that would sustain them forever, that their prices just kept going up and up. Like there were price guides for Beanie Babies and people who would be paid $25 to authenticate a Beanie Baby that's worth $5 to like go through and make sure it's legit. And they would give you a price on it. And they'd say your $5 Beanie Baby's worth $800, but if you hold on to it now, it'll be worth $5,000 in 10 years. Well, most people held on to them found it wasn't worth any more than what they bought it for at the store.
The market crashed on them.
Market crashed like hard because they're mass produced. Like they're all the belief about the potential of Beanie Babies and the value they had was just an illusion. I mean, people, there were robberies over Beanie Babies. There was a man shot and killed. There was a couple in Las Vegas who were divorcing and they couldn't divide their Beanie Baby assets. So the judge made them pick Beanie Babies in the courtroom, like one by one.
Beanie Baby draft.
Yeah, it's like a Beanie Baby draft. Like I'm gonna pick the dog. Now I'm gonna pick the Princess Di, and they're going like in court. It's just, McDonald's had a Beanie Baby giveaway, and people were like going from McDonald's to McDonald's to get the whole set and just throwing the food away, and then they would sell them on eBay. And over 10% of eBay's revenue when they went public in '98 was Beanie Babies related. Like in their S1. eBay says like the volatility of the Beanie Baby market is a risk to their business. That's how big it got. So it reflected like what was kind of going on in the macro economy at the time with the .com bubble, where you had a lot of speculative investment put into internet stocks. Some of them turned out to be valuable. Like Amazon is one of the largest companies in the world, and they were a part of that bubble. But there's a ton of them that had multi-billion-dollar valuations, ran Super Bowl ads, and they didn't even exist like 2 years after their founding. They were just completely worthless based off of like a fantasy idea. Like that just wasn't a realistic business plan given the technology and distribution that existed in '99, but people ran with it. So I saw like the Beanie Babies kind of as like a low culture version. The investors put their money in a internet stock. That's like where they're showing like the irrational side of capitalism, and like everyday folks are hoarding Beanie Babies. Not everyone did this, but enough people did it that it kind of created a bout of insanity temporarily.
Similar to NFTs today. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, this doesn't go away. Think about what I said about Beanie Babies, about like a community developed. They were told to be scarce, that their value was going to go up forever. They experienced a huge boom temporarily and got everyone excited. And then once people realized like it's not that rare and not that valuable and there's not that much demand for it, the market just collapses, and people who put all their time and money in it lost their ass. Most of them did. So the NFT, like, you watch Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton talking about NFTs a few years ago on the Tonight Show. It's kind of reminiscent of some of those Beanie Baby collectors trying to keep the market afloat after it had washed in the sand.
Yeah, I never really understood NFTs. I tried to understand like how this was going to be like a long-term thing, and I never got it. Maybe it will materialize and be some sort of store of value or a way for people to market products. I
Well,
don't know.
there'll be parts of crypto technology that will materialize and
Mhm.
be influential in the world and have
Oh yeah, there are
applications.
already a ton. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But like that specific one, kind of a novelty.
Hmm. So pro wrestling. Were you a pro wrestling guy growing
Oh
up?
hell yeah, brother!
Yeah, I was. I guess it was Was it WWF back then? I
Yep,
think.
yep.
Yeah. Then they switched to WWE. Then there's been mergers and things that have happened. But that wrestling culture, I think you talk about in the book. Um, when was it that Jesse Ventura was elected governor of Minnesota?
January 4th of '99.
That was 99. Okay.
Yeah,
I
well,
was
that was
going
when
to
he was
say,
sworn
yeah,
in. He would have been elected, like November of '98. But yeah, he was sworn in '99
that is so wild in hindsight that he was able to make that transition from
as
the
a third
wrestling
party
world
too.
to politics.
Like he was a reform party. That's what's crazy too. He went from wrestling to politics. He wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't a Republican. Still got elected, and then after one term, like he didn't even run for reelection. He's just on like he'd done Hollywood. He'd done pro wrestling. He became governor. He just had enough. Going to do his own thing. Go in this other direction. But like at the time Ventura was elected, WWE went public. Like their ratings peaked. Their wrestlers were all on all sorts of TV programs and
Mhm.
magazine covers. It was in the United States, it was much more popular then than it is right now. Like the like violent and sexual programming they had at the time was like super captivating. People loved it. The Attitude Era.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember, growing up, I almost never missed Monday Night Raw. I would watch that over Monday Night Football, unless the Steelers were playing. Then I'd watch Monday Night Football. But it was big. Wrestling was huge growing up, and it's been interesting to see like the major players in wrestling. I guess when did the Rocks when did the Rock start to wrestle? When was that? That
Well,
was in
he was in late '90s. So like '99, the
yeah.
top two wrestlers are Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock.
Okay. Yeah, because it's been crazy to see like what The Rock has done. Going in, of
Oh
course,
yeah,
becoming a big movie star, and he has this huge entrepreneurial empire with energy drinks and all kinds of other stuff.
yeah, he's one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and like that was like the early 2000s when I think his first big roles was like he did some cameos like Star Trek, what Voyager. He
Hmm.
wrestled Seven of Nine in an episode, but then like he was in the Mummy movies and the Scorpion King, and then like it just snowballed. And there had been wrestlers who had like had Hollywood success. Like Hogan had been in some movies; they were mostly flops, and there had been some wrestlers who had like done other business ventures or done politics. But the ones from the '90s like just became so much more successful than
Hmm.
those before him, especially The Rock. I mean, Linda McMahon now, she was the CEO of WWE at the time. She's going to be like education secretary.
Yeah.
So it's like just absolutely crazy how influential that programming is, and obviously Trump loves it. He's in the Hall of Fame.
It's crazy, especially with the Linda McMahon thing, with her being secretary of Department of Education, right?
Yeah.
With all the controversy around Vince McMahon and all the lawsuits and everything that's happened and steroids and sex scandals and like it's wild that family is able to still do something like they're still married, right? Vince and Linda McMahon
I think they're married, but like
in a
maybe they're
business sense.
separated. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I can't imagine still being married to him would be very satisfying. She's got her own path and career now. But she's been able to, like you said, there's all these scandals, like well before the recent ones. There's been scandals with Vince McMahon going back to the 80s.
Hmm.
Uh, those have all stuck, like been attached to him. She's done a good job of not letting that like fall on her, even though she was aware and around for all of it. She was the CEO of the company for like
Hmm.
it's the biggest part of its duration.
Yeah. To be fair, though, to be fair to Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon, So when this was back in 2018, I managed a U.S. Senate campaign for the Libertarian candidate here in Pennsylvania, Dale Kearns. And a big part of what he did was go around the state. He got plugged in with the addiction community, and a guy by the name of Chris Dreisbach, who's been on the show, who's real big on this, who's real big in this state, helping really with reform in the policing community, how to deal with addiction, things like that. He also CEO of a company, Blueprints for Addiction Recovery. But anyway, he connected with a bunch of wrestlers that would come in on the speaking tour and go around. And I got to meet like X-Pac.
That's
and
awesome.
A lot of these wrestlers would talk about they had struggled with addiction, and Vince McMahon and the WWE, would pay for everything, would send them into rehab, would, try to get them clean. I think X-Pac told a story that he was like in Mexico, and they pulled him out of Mexico and got him into a rehab facility. Of course, he didn't get clean until he was ready to, but when he was ready to, like, they were there to support him. So with all that being said, all the scandals, I think there were some good things happening too.
Yeah, perhaps. And I like this programming. So like, we can bag on Vince McMahon, but a lot of my fondest like entertainment as a child was watching shows that he created.
Mm-hmm.
Like like the Stone Cold Steve Austin character is he's the visionary of that,
No, for sure. And like, to go back to kind of what we were talking about at the outset of this wrestling conversation, like that pivotal time, The Rock really just hit it just at the right time, right when the internet is taking off and you can start to create your own personal brand aside from it. So he could not only, when he did step outside and start doing movies, he could step outside of that and be like, I'm not the Rock, the wrestler, the Rock, the movie character. I'm also Dwayne Johnson. And, and now he's, of course, has a massive Instagram following and TikTok and all that stuff.
That's a part of how it became more popular in the 90s. And that goes back to deregulation. Now, the wrestling deregulation isn't like coming from the FCC the way that like some of these other things that I mentioned, or it isn't coming from Congress, like the Telecommunications Act, but it's coming from like mostly from individual state athletic commissions. During the 80s, the McMahons wanted to lower their taxes and get around some fees that they were paying to athletic commissions, who, like, if you regulate wrestling like boxing, you have to have medical professionals there. You have to pay some commission fees. If you say it's more like a theatrical play, you don't have to do that stuff. So part of the way they got out of that, though, is they came out and said, well, wrestling's scripted. It's not real. And of course, people knew that, but there had never been like the public acknowledgement from the head of the WWF like that.
So was that 99 when they came out and said
no, they came out and started saying that like in the 80s.
Okay. I thought
but what I'm saying is that's like what helped them become more popular is once they did that separation. And in the 90s is when they got most states to go along with it. Like they got like 25 states within a decade to like basically do what they want, cut their taxes. But they were old school wrestlers were worried that doing that's going to ruin wrestling. Like if you come out and you say it's scripted, no one's going to want to watch. Why would you watch like The Rock versus Stone Cold if you know they're not actually fighting and a writer determined who won? But the complete opposite happened for the reasons you're saying. Once they said that like this is a fabrication, these guys didn't have to be their characters all the time. Like back in the day, like Magnum TA or Ric Flair or whoever, they had to be that person. Like if they were on the Tonight Show or if they're in their public life, good guys couldn't even go to the bar with a bad guy, even if it's their best friend. Like
I think Ric Flair is still living that though.
Yeah, he probably is. Like he's old school. Yeah, but like The Rock and all these other guys got more fans to buy into it because they would go on the Tonight Show and he wouldn't be The Rock, he'd be Dwayne Johnson. He'd be a regular guy, and he'd talk about like the differences between his character and him, and like that there was a new fascination with fans and trying to discern what happened in wrestling that was scripted and what was unplanned, and then learning more about like the difference between the character and the guy. Like Glenn Jacobs, Kane, mayor of like a small town in Tennessee, I think.
Knox County, Tennessee, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Like that would be harder to do back in the day. He can be Kane and a mayor in his personal life. Like he can do, he could do that now. And he did that even before he retired. So, admitting like the fakery or they wrestlers get mad if you say fake, admitting that it's scripted actually became a promotion.
Yeah. That's actually kind of crazy. I've never thought about it quite that way.
And no one did it better than The Rock.
Yeah, that's the truth. And he's still doing it. And I mean, there's some who say The Rock could have a future in politics, which I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it might happen.
I wouldn't be surprised. There's a plot line in his show, The Young Rock, that's basically about that.
Yeah. I haven't watched any of his shows. Was there just one season or?
I think there was 2 or 3. It was on NBC. I didn't watch all of it. I probably watched like 15 episodes and that was enough.
Yeah. That was
like,
enough.
It was fine. It wasn't terrible, but like, yeah, I don't need like 50 episodes of this or whatever they made.
So Ross, we're pretty much out of time here, but I want to ask you, I mean, obviously there's a lot that we didn't touch on that you wrote about in this book. Is there anything you think, really important, that you want to touch on, let my audience know about, that we didn't get to talk about today?
I would just say my main takeaway is that like the entertainment that people often mock, can still shape the world in a lot of powerful ways. So, pro wrestling took a lot of heat back in the day. So did Jerry Springer. They were looked down upon, but I'd say that stuff influences our culture more than those great movies from '99 do.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're onto something here. And like we talked about at the top, like a super unique idea, to even come up to write about this. So kudos to you for thinking of that. Obviously tell people where they can buy the book, where they can follow what you're doing and read anything else you're writing.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and it's just at Ross Benish. And you can get the book. We can get it on any website that books are sold. But if you use the code 241999, so 24/1999 at the University Press of Kansas website, you get free shipping and 30% off. So that knocked like $10 off the Amazon price.
All right. Well, Ross, thanks for coming on the show, man. This was fun.
That was fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right. All right. That is a wrap for today's show. I want to thank my guest, Ross Bennis. And yeah, I mean, it's all this talk about 1999. It's making me a bit nostalgic. So I might have to go watch some old Jerry Springer episodes. As I almost fall out of my chair here. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you like this show, if you like what we do on Wednesday with Brian McWilliams show, please subscribe, whatever app or whatever site you're watching the podcast on. We appreciate it. With that being said, I will see you all next week with another awesome guest. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.